morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of 2021. Happy New Year to you all. I'm Sheila from the Philippines, and I hope that you are safe and well wherever you are. We have a very interesting topic today, which is executive decision making. And it teaches us the art of making the right decisions. We know that I have made a lot of poor decisions in my life, and we probably need this in this very uncertain times. And I welcome you all on behalf of the International Leadership Team. And before we start with the webinar proper, I would like to welcome Sean, who would like to give us a message for tonight.
Thank you, Sheila. Happy New Year for 2021 to you and to our neurosemantic community. So may your new year be the year that you refresh your dreams. So hello, my name is Sean Dwyer, the International Metacoach President, and I'd like you to imagine a brand new world where you connect with your friends again. Imagine a brand new world where you achieve your deepest dreams. Imagine a brand new world you achieve your self-actualizing highest potentials. Imagine a brand new world. You see only sparkling beauty in other people's eyes, and you feel the excitement from face-to-face trainings and coachings again. Imagine in a brand new world where you hear sounds of more empowering callback songs and laughter of those in your presence. Imagine a brand new world where you provide more training, coaching services. Imagine in a brand new world where hotspots are vaccinated and people can live without fear of the pandemia. Imagine a brand new world. Your new normal allows you to be more of who you wish to become. Imagine a brand new world for 2021, and welcome to Executive Decisions. I hope you really enjoyed today's community webinar with our neurosemantic community. So thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sean, for that very inspiring message. And I can't imagine myself being in a whole new world where there's no distancing that's needed. And next, I would like to welcome David, our president of the ISNS, to give us a message as well. Hi, David.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you. Thank you for your welcome. And thank you, Sean, for your very inspiring words, for helping us to imagine the world that we want, the 2020 that we want, 21, sorry, that we want. So I just want to say that something that all of us, we know, 2020 has been a tough year for most of us, perhaps especially for trainers. Of course, some of us, for some has been harder, for others a little bit less, but at the end it was a very atypical year. So we are starting a new year, and this means new opportunities. So more than just wishing you a very good 2021, I want to remind you the very foundation of neurosemantics. We don't have any control of what happens in the world. We don't have any control about what the pandemic and all the international decisions that regulate our countries around the pandemic. But the only thing that we can control is our way to respond to what happens in the world. You own your own meanings, you own your meanings, and that means that you own your responses. So my wish is for you to create the best meanings for this new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for reminding us we are in control of our thoughts and our feelings. And we are also in charge and totally in control of the decision that we make. And before we start, I just want to remind everyone to please be on mute for the entire time unless you're going to ask a question. And if you do have a question about the talk, please write on the chat box and write the word question before you type your question so it will be easier for us to filter. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Snyder, who will be moderating tonight's discussion. And of course, I would like to welcome the director and reason for everyone of us to be here together, Michael Hall and Geraldine Hall. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. As I kind of scroll through all the faces here, it's just so nice to see so many people that I've met before in the past and some of the people that I hope to meet in the near future as we get back out into our training and normal training environment and normal training schedule. I'm really excited to be here today to moderate this conversation with Michael. I imagine that over the past couple of months, he's read quite a few books on decisions before writing his own book on decision making. And so I think we have a great opportunity here to get inside of his mind and learn how we can apply better decisions in our lives personally as well as professionally. So thank you, Michael, and welcome.
Thank you, Jason. When it comes to decisions, decisions have brought you to where you are in your life. So wherever you are in your life, whatever circumstances you're facing, decisions brought you there. The decisions you made or the decisions you failed to make. And so decision shapes our lives. The decisions you make formulates your future. And with sometimes a single decision, you can utterly transform your life, your future, your destiny. Pretty powerful thing, decision. So the question is, what is a decision? What is the psychology of decision? And what I'd like to begin with is just to share some facts about decision that are pretty amazing. First of all, decision affects everything. You decide what to do. That's the most obvious. I'm going to do this or that. You decide who to be, your identity. You decide who to be with. You decide how to be with the persons you're with. You decide on how to think. You decide on what to believe. You decide on what to value. You decide on how to use time, what career to pursue, what problems to solve, what problems to ignore, how to solve problems. You decide on what to create, what to innovate. The list just goes on and on and on and on. Decision for us human beings is what navigates today, tomorrow, and the future. So when it comes to decision, it seems so pervasive and it seems so obvious. The problem with decisions, though, is that though they seem simple, they are exceedingly complex. Now, the word decision, scission, to cut, and to cut off, ends up in the yes-no response. So, yes, I'm going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Yes, I'm going to read that. No, I'm not going to read that. It seems so simple. But the complexity is very deep because in order to make a true decision, you have to do a lot of thinking, choosing your values, your criteria, your standards by which you make that decision. The thinking is about content. It's about beliefs. It's about pros and cons. It's about weighing and comparing how things go. And so when it comes to a decision, it seems like it's a primary state. Yes, I'm going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. And yet it's a very complex, layered metastate. And that's why children do not make decisions and cannot make a true decision until puberty or so, when they are able to do abstract thinking. When it's just concrete thinking, we generally default to either circumstance, emotion, or other people. And so we're not making decisions. We're defaulting to the circumstances. And so if you listen to children, you made me, he made me, it made me. They're not making decisions. They're just defaulting to a circumstance. Or they default to emotion. I felt, I wanted, I hated, I couldn't stand. So the emotion, they just reacted. They didn't make a decision, they reacted. Or default to other people. What should I do? Where should I go? What should I wear? And so we default to other people. Everybody else is doing it. So true decision is an adult experience that requires quite a few years of preparation, of getting ready to actually think through something and make up your mind about something. And now you're ready, and you're at the place of making a decision.
Right. So you say there that children don't have the option to decide, but it's interesting to me. I think when you go through the list of all the things we decide, we choose our job, we choose our relationships. I think as adults, a lot of us don't actually actively choose those things either.
Yes, and that's going to be the problem, another problem of decision. Not only are decisions deceptively simple in structure and yet complex in actual nature, but in the psychology of decisions, we all make poor decisions. It's our nature. It's who we are as human beings. It takes a long time to make smart decisions, intelligent decisions, and so by nature we make poor decisions. And I think every one of us could start making quite an extensive list of the poor decisions that we've made over our lives. It's the most natural thing. It's the norm to make poor decisions. And yet poor decisions is what undermines life, the quality of life, your enjoyment of life, because now we have regrets and we're working on trying to undo the decisions that we've made. And so poor decisions is the norm, and defaulting on decision making is also the norm. So here's three problems of decisions. First of all, they're deceptively simple, hiding complexity. Secondly, poor deciding is the norm. So we have to fight against that and resist that. Third, defaulting on decision making is also the norm.
So it's the norm for us to default our decisions to the world and to other people. It sounds like kind of the opposite of responsibility, kind of where we started with David talking about owning our responses. If we're defaulting our decision making, it sounds like we're actually giving away our power in a sense. Is that correct?
Exactly. Which is why a lot of people have such a hard time with the first pattern that we do in APG, in neurosemantics, and that is owning your power. Because they have spent a lifetime not taking ownership of those powers by which they can make decisions.
And I could imagine that there would be some limiting frames there that could potentially show up. If I was to own my decisions, then all of the implications of that to somebody who has been defaulting their decisions prior to that.
Yeah. That is in the first problem. The decisions are deceptively simple. Inside of the decision is a real opportunity to be afraid. The fear of making a decision, because now I have to live with it. Now I have to be responsible for it and accountable to what I decided to think or believe or choose or do.
So it sounds like decision making is very For what I'm hearing from you is that decision making is very related with self-actualization, that more self-actualizing people would probably be more responsible for making more well thought through decisions.
Well, yes, I hadn't even thought about that, but Abraham Maslow said that the first step in self-actualization is choosing.
The
Is
first
deciding.
step of self-actualization is deciding.
Yeah. So the fear of deciding is why a lot of people will not and refuse, absolutely refuse, which is a decision, absolutely refuse to make a New Year's resolution. Fear of deciding. What's the fear? Well, the fear is I'm accountable, I'm responsible, I can't hold my emotions, my circumstances, or other people accountable, but also now I have to live the decision.
So, and what do you think is the fear behind that? So if I had to live my decision, then what's the implications of that?
Well, commitment. So inside of the complexity of deciding is that we live decisions. If I decide I'm going to move to a city, the decision then becomes where I live. If I decide to take a job, then showing up to work each day at that place is how I live the decision. If I decide to quit smoking, then so decisions are lived. And that's what makes them scary, because it's not just a thought with no consequences. To decide is to cut off these options, saying no to good things and saying yes to a great thing. And so part of the complexity of a decision is that when you decide, you're committing yourself from this day forward, I will do this, think this, feel this, whatever the decision is.
So it's my sense that a lot of people make decisions, but aren't really decisions. Like they'll say from this day, if it's New Year's and from this day forward, I'm going to, exercise every day in the morning. But then it seems like it's a decision. But so what is what gives there?
Yeah. So now you've made the distinction between a real decision and a pseudo decision. And how many of us have made many pseudo decisions? People who make New Year's resolutions, but they really do not follow through and do not let the commitment lead them to live that decision. They end up making a pseudo decision, and then that weakens their willpower. It weakens their intentionality, so that as they reflect back on it, New Year's resolutions don't work. I don't like making decisions. I don't like setting goals. And so now they undermine their own resourcefulness, their own power by their pseudo decisions.
So making pseudo decisions or these loose commitments can actually weaken our intentionality and in the long run weaken our decision-making power.
Yeah. With our reflexivity, as we think about how I make a decision and live it, if I don't do it well, then I start questioning myself, doubting myself, undermines confidence, has lots of negative consequences for a pseudo decision. And yet how easy it is and how tempting it is. Will you do this? Yes, I'll do it. When we haven't thought it through, we haven't really committed. We're just getting someone off our back by saying we're going to do something. And it seems like a decision, sounds like a decision, but it's not.
So we have a question here in the chat let me see who this is from Wilhelm. And he's asking, so we build our conscious decisions on the decisions that we made as children that perhaps we're unconscious of now. Is that statement valid? And would there then be value in helping someone become conscious of their former unconscious decisions?
Well, the decisions of childhood are not real decisions. I mean, that's the first thing. We talk to children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And all kinds of wonderful and imaginative things occur. But children really do not make a decision. From neurology and neurosciences, the part of our brain that makes decisions is the frontal lobes. So the prefrontal lobes is where we plan, we decide, we choose, we think through things. It's that executive decision-making area of the brain, which is not literally, it's not developed until puberty. Puberty is when certain brain chemicals begin to complete the development of the prefrontal lobes. So whatever decisions you've made as a child, first of all, they weren't real decisions. And so that's why in puberty and thereafter, owning our power to think, to feel, to speak, to do, owning that, embracing it, is a high-level metastate that we call responsibility. And it takes some development to do that. Children can learn to do taking some responsibility by behavioral reward and enforcement. But to really think it through and make an executive decision, that comes later.
So as children, we don't even have the for lack of a better word, the hardware to make well thought through decisions.
Right. So during childhood, we all do three things. We default to circumstances, emotions, and others. So three things that most of us have to get over when we become adults is to stop deferring to the world makes me and to say, I am responding and choosing to respond. We have to get over just reacting on our emotions. Well, I felt like it. I wanted to. So when I've worked with young teenagers who were convicted of violence and anger control problems, the problem was always, but I felt it. And if I feel it, I have to do it, which is really an animalistic, not a humanistic, an animalistic way of responding. And it's just reaction. Getting us adults to take a breath, step back, claim a meta moment to reflect on our emotions. Should I act on this? Should I not act on this? Should I just put this on hold? Should I act on this in this particular way so that it'll serve my relationships, it'll be ecological for me? That's a pretty adult thing for teenagers and adults to develop, which is essential if you're going to make executive decisions.
All right, so it sounds like making executive decisions is a lot of work. And maybe that's why a lot of people are defaulting. Another reason.
It's a lot of cognitive effort. Because when I decide, let's say I'm going to decide on where to move, and I've got 2 or 3 options. It's a lot of cognitive effort to think my values, my context, my relationships, all the variables, all the factors that's going to play into this, and the consequences. Here's another reason children are not able to make a real decision. They do not think consequently. Thinking consequently, which is part of the prefrontal lobes to anticipate the future, is something that develops in puberty and thereafter, to actually do consequential thinking. As adults and as parents, we try to help our children when they're 8 or 9 think about what's going to happen if you do this. And of course, trying to get them to do that until puberty, they really cannot think it through, which is part of decision making.
So we have a question here from Francisco wondering, so how do we help someone? Let's say we have a coaching client who's having a hard time making decisions, or they make pseudo decisions, or they're insecure about past decisions. What could you give us today that would help us to better coach someone who's in that situation?
Okay, I'm going to hold that off for just a moment because I want to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get to that, there's a few other things to say about decision making to understand really what's involved in decision making. So I'll do that first, and then I'll come back to that. When it comes to decisions, here's another factor that is part of the simple deceptiveness of pseudo decisions. Decisions accumulate. Every day, every one of us probably makes 100, 200, maybe 500 decisions. What to wear, what to eat, where to go, what to say. We make hundreds of decisions, and these everyday decisions, most of them seem innocuous. Like, it doesn't make that much difference. And so the decisions we make throughout the day, driving to work and listening to the radio, talking, most of them seem inconsequential. But here's the thing about decisions. Decisions accumulate. And this may be the first question also about, from Willem, about childhood decisions. We make decisions, and then we build on decisions and build on decisions, and we make the same decision over and over and over and over. So if I keep defaulting to my emotions and I don't feel like exercising day after day after, and so every day, well, I'm going to exercise, but I don't feel like it today, it starts accumulating. What then happens with anything that is regular and patterned is that it becomes a pattern. It becomes an unconscious response pattern, and it now works on automatic, so that decisions hide in our patterns. So one way to find patterns or decisions, to detect old decisions that don't serve us well, is to look at our automatic patterned responses to things. How do you typically respond to criticism? How do you typically respond to bad news? How do you typically respond to a lot of chocolates or pastries? So decisions accumulate and build up into these habits, and then it can become a lot of cognitive awareness and choice to break those old habits that decisions have accumulated in. So that's another place where decisions hide.
So decisions are hiding in our patterns, our automatic patterns. And sometimes we make these little decisions, or they seem inconsequential, but over time we're habituating responses that may not serve us well.
Yeah.
And if we want to find the decision, let's look at the game. It sounds to me like every frame has a game, while every game has a frame driving it.
All right. So this goes to now maybe where a decision had been made. It wasn't a real decision, but it was a decision of some level. I hate studying. A fifth grader may make. I hate school. I hate studying. And then it starts to accumulate. And while it wasn't a thought out real decision, it became a concrete decision in that person's mind. This is what the NLP pattern, Decision Destroyer, is designed to do. To go back to the first time you made some stupid decision. You know, people will only like me if I look rich. So I'll wear brand name clothes, then they'll like me. Some stupid decision like that accumulated and that got reinforced behaviorally. And so we go back to the first place and we use the Decision Destroyer pattern. And so that's one way to start changing old decisions that have gotten locked in and have become lifestyle.
So we can go back using this pattern from the Decision Destroyer pattern would be an example of a way to go back, and maybe before it was even a decision, you went at a time, you made an unconscious response, and then it solidified over time. We can go back using timeline processes and straighten that out.
Yeah. So in terms of how to make a truly executive decision, we're talking about a decision that is thought out, one that fits values, criteria, standards, one that is significant and meaningful to you, one in which you have contextualized it so that it fits the context, the ecology of your life, relationships, health, finance, whatever. And so when we make that kind of decision, usually it involves planning. That is, anticipating and creating a strategy. So here now is another NLP intervention that you can use with helping someone make great decisions. What's your strategy for? Let's say you have a setback. Let's say that the pandemic of 2020 caused some economic setbacks. What's your plan for resilience? So as you think through what resilience is, then the question of how to do it is your planning. And the planning is a strategy. Inside that strategy, you'll need several states from which to be functioning. And inside of all of that strategy, you'll also need some contingency planning. So part of decision making, it's just integrated, it's the backside of the same thing: planning, strategizing, contingency planning, risk management. And so what you brought up earlier, it's a lot of work. It's certainly a lot of cognitive effort.
So decision making also involves a strategy for how we decide, and also what I'm hearing from you is that we have to think through some contingency plans. So when we make a decision, what happens if this happens? What happens if that? So then when we're making decisions, we're building kind of a rich possibility map of the future. Is that a way of explaining it? Like thinking through all of the possibilities, or as many as we can as human beings, and try to cover as many bases as possible?
Right. So there's that overall decision. I'm going to become highly resilient as a person and not let a setback set me back. I'm going to bounce back with resilience. Then there's multiple smaller decisions inside that big decision. And so from a metastate perspective, there's the large frame of the big decision, and then all the smaller decisions inside the strategy that moves along. And this is what makes decision making, executive decision making, complex.
So could you define that for us? How would you define executive decision making?
So an executive decision making is really a decision that's going to be governing and informing and managing all of the decisions that have to be made. So just like an executive in an organization makes a decision and sets a policy for something, you can't leave it there. You then have to follow up with the senior managers, the junior managers. How does it get implemented?
So executive decision making is making decisions that get implemented. Is that fair to say?
So in terms of the stages of decision making, we can divide it into 3 stages: preparing, initiating, concluding. So preparing. So in preparing, there's 2 stages. There's framing and there's information gathering. So when it comes to a significant decision, what job to take, who to marry, where to move, how to set up my health and fitness program, developing my professional career, the preparation is framing and information gathering. So framing is where you establish your presuppositions, your premises, and you begin framing the why and the intention for what you're going to do. That governs the information gathering. What information do I need? How much information do I need? Information from whom? Information about the context, about the options, and just on and on. Information gathering.
So if let's say I'm thinking through about buying a car. So what would be an example of some framing that I could do to prepare myself for information gathering?
So the first framing would be around your intention. So the why. Why is it important to buy a new car or a new car to you? So finding your intention. If you don't operate intentionally, then you'll be operating attentionally, and that means you're giving power to circumstances, other people, and emotions. So first framing is intention. What's my intention? Another framing is buying a car. The design is to achieve what? To status, economy, travel, sustainability of the vehicle. So setting up the design of the choice. If we don't frame it and prepare it, then we will be much more likely to be persuaded, influenced, manipulated by other people and circumstances.
So that makes a lot of sense. So thinking through what is our intention, what do we want for whatever our decision is, to get clear on that before we start gathering information.
So this is where the well-formed outcome becomes a critical piece in helping someone make good decisions. The 18 questions of the well-formed outcome. Then there's the information gathering. And how long will that take? So every time I write a book, that's part of the decision and the framing. What information do I gather? From whom? How long do I do that? How many books will I read in order to have a good understanding of a discipline so that I'm ready to write? So the information gathering will be about the facts that you want to achieve and doing critical thinking about the facts, the variables, the context. So information gathering. A lot of people, because it's a lot of cognitive effort, skip this stage and hope that by coincidence, they'll have the right information. And later on, after they've made a decision and the decision went awry, they'll go, what was I thinking? And of course, the answer is, I wasn't. I wasn't really thinking through the information and the quality of that information. So that's preparation stage of decision making.
Yeah, I think in that situation there, just to make a comment from my own personal experience, in that situation, sometimes what happens in my life is that I'll get overwhelmed by all the information. So there's just so much information. And I default to not making a decision. So that could happen, I think, quite a few times.
Yeah.
Another problem.
Yeah. So when we get overwhelmed with a decision, that really takes us back to framing. What information do I need? What information is relevant? What information is not? And so you set up your frames for that. Right now, I'm studying metaphor. That'll be the next book, Metaphor. And in setting up the framing, and these stages are not sequential, and that in the sense that when you're done with this stage, you never go back to it. As I gather information, I realize another frame to set. Because there's a lot of stuff I'm reading about metaphor that has nothing to do with what I want to write about or say. So it sends me back to, here's another framing, because this information is irrelevant. And this information is relevant. So in that preparation stage, framing and information gathering, you're back and forth constantly.
And to me, it sounds like there's maybe a bit of an active meta program there, because maybe, or maybe some optimization of a meta program. So if I need to have all the framings right before I go and gather information, then I'm never going to get to that stage.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah. The next stage of decision making is initiating. So you got all this information. Now we need to identify several things. First of all, my initial understanding. Here's where I am right now as I think about this decision. Here are my values. Here's what's really important, and here's the prioritizing of it. Diagnosing whatever the situation is, so that you have a good diagnosis of the situation and where you want to go with it. And then separating knowledge between primary knowledge and meta-knowledge. So that's the beginning place. I do that when I write a book by writing out the first draft. The first draft is my initial understanding of something. And then as I read that first draft the second time, I'm looking for, what are the values that I'm presenting or assuming or working with? What's important? I'm also looking at the level of knowledge, the primary level of knowledge, and then the meta knowledge about it, knowledge about knowledge. And those will be the principles or the rules or the heuristics. And so being able to understand that. If we apply that to resilience, at the primary level is, what do you have to do to bounce back? What do you have to do? What state do you need to be in? That's primary knowledge. Meta knowledge is, how many stages are there? What stage am I at right now? As I step back and reflect, where am I? So that would be meta-knowledge of how resilience works. One piece of meta-knowledge would be making sure that I'm not personalizing, making it permanent, making it pervasive. So that becomes meta-knowledge about any particular step. And so when we initiate a decision, this is the first information we're working with. And as we do that, the next part of the second stage is testing. And once again, we're back and forth, testing, and then cleaning up the information, testing, cleaning up the information, checking on cognitive biases, checking on cognitive distortions, checking on cognitive fallacies. So the quality of thinking is the quality of the information I'm working with. Here with the testing, it's so important to be skeptical. What if I'm wrong? What if I don't have the right information? And so using skepticism for critical thinking as I work through the information, if I don't do that, then I can get caught up in the confirmation bias. I'm just confirming what I want to be true. And then I only get information that supports what I already believe. So I'm really not open to new information. Or the availability bias. I'm just operating on what's available. And so this is where the decision making, whether it's individual or a group, having someone play devil's advocate with us to really test the quality of the information. The quality of the decision is a function of the quality of the information.
So the quality of the decision is a function of the quality of the information, and that's why it's so important to bring in a skeptic's attitude, or just have somebody to look for what am I not seeing, what could be wrong with what I'm already thinking, to go against that availability bias and that confirmation bias. And when you're talking about action here, are you talking about acting upon the decision that you've made, or are we still in planning to make the decision?
Yeah.
Right. So this sounds like to me kind of like if we're going down the well-formed outcome funnel, we're getting to the how part. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. So to go back to buying a car, you go into a car lot and a salesman is working with you, and the worst thing is to feel pressured. This deal will last till 5 o'clock this evening. If you don't buy and you don't choose by 5 o'clock, it'll be gone. And of course, what they're doing is preventing us from going home, talking about it, getting someone else's opinion, reading about the quality of the car. And so building in some room to think about it instead of just reacting automatically is part of executive decision making.
So that's an interesting point. So now, what I'm thinking of here is that there's lots of people out there, like everybody but you, for example, who could be trying to go against you making good decisions. All the salespeople and the marketers and the advertisers and the politicians and the media, everyone, there's lots of vested interest in other people potentially not having us make these executive decisions.
One of the quotations I put in the book was from a famous CEO who, when everybody on the team unanimously decided, let's do this, and he said, is there anybody with any objection? And said, no. Said, well, we're not ready to make the decision because of groupthink, which is another cognitive bias. It's too easy to be caught up into that mob mentality that everybody is saying it or doing it. So that's stage 2. First is preparation, which is framing and information gathering. Stage 2 is initiating, which is working over the information with testing. The third stage of decision making is the concluding stage. Now we make the decision. So everything up till now has been facilitating the decision, and now we decide, we set our plan in motion, we organize what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, the strategy, and we have our contingency plans in place. And so as we go into concluding, we now bring it to a conclusion and make sure that all the pieces are there, and that leads to implementation. So concluding, implementing, which is the action stage, and then the 7th one is feedback. We keep track of how's it going and what adjustments do we keep making given the feedback as to, and so we're again testing it with the feedback and refining it as we go.
So decision making. So first of all of this is before we've made the decision, and then finally we make that decision, and now there's still ongoing deciding going on. Yeah.
So with a big decision, you can make provisional decisions. I did that actually with the book on decision making, because when I started, I did not know if I wanted to actually write the book. I figured I'll do the study, and if it looks like there's something I can contribute that's going to be unique from the neurosemantic or the NLP perspective, then I'll do it. So my initial decision was provisional. I will do it if.
Mm-hmm.
So many times, a decision will be like that. When I created the meta program board game, I did all the initial framing and information gathering, all the structuring and testing, and then the planning and sequencing, and then I realized at this point I needed to make a provisional decision, so I decided to make 4 games and test it. So I went to Hobby Lobby, created 4 games, board games, and all the pieces, and then I tested it out in some groups, and then that brought it back to the final decision. Shall I do it? Because at that point, the cost was something like $30,000. And do I make that investment?
So now we're relating decision-making potentially with creativity and innovation and innovating something, and the decisions that go through in actually innovating a product or a service.
Well, and I would say every decision leads to innovation. Every decision leads to creation, because you're creating your life, you're creating your lifestyle. Even if you decide to start doing Pilates or start running, you're creating, and then you're innovating. So, given the stages, the 3 primary stages and the 7 detail stages of decision making for individuals and groups, you can see how complex a real decision is. Jason, are you there?
Yeah, I'm processing. I'm trying to decide if I've ever made any real decisions before in the past or if I've just defaulted all along. So yeah, there's a lot going on here in terms of the how to make decisions here, and walking through this process, mapped out. There is a structure to decision making, though, is what I'm hearing. That it's not just willy-nilly, go with your gut and trust your intuition, but there's an actual structure to how to make well thought through, well formed decisions.
Yeah. So to the Meta Coaches e-group, maybe 2 months ago, I sent out a well-formed decision set of questions. I used the same 18 questions, but it completely different for a well-formed decision. So all the Meta Coaches, you got that like 2 months ago on the list, and it starts with deciding on the subject, getting the context, then the required actions that you're actually going to do, and then the capacity, the power to do those things, and then the process, the how, and then the resources that support the decision, and then the concluding, so that you bring it to a good conclusion, so that now it becomes lifestyle, and you've got your indicators as to what demonstrates that in life.
So Francisco is dancing in his chair to know, how do we apply this with our coaching clients? Can we know that yet? How do we work with someone who's indecisive or regretting poor decisions from the past?
Okay, so now you brought up another issue, and that is, what are all the problems of decision making? It could be indecisive. So some people are indecisive, which probably goes back to commitment. They're afraid of the commitment and the actual doing that, being held accountable. Some people have so many options that they can't say no to good things. So they can say yes to a great thing. So they have to address that. Some people have some old decisions that they've made that need to be eliminated, broken up, and so the decision destroyer. Some people just don't know how to do the process, so they need to learn how to do the process. So the question becomes, what is your problem in decision making? Where do you get stuck in decision making? It could be an identity issue. I'm not a decisive person. So decision making. It could be values. I don't know what's really important. I haven't really clarified my values and my intentionality. So the first thing in coaching would be to identify where a person has problems in executive decision making.
So looking for the outcome would be making better decisions or making executive decisions, and looking for what are the interferences for that individual, going through the list of things that you just went through there, and coaching to the interferences. So we've got quite a few questions here in the chat. I mean, they've just been pumping in. Let me see if I can just pop out a couple of those before we give you the opportunity to say whatever final words you want to say. Is that all right with you, Michael?
Sure.
So we've got here, Gyro is asking, what about intuition on taking on decisions?
Yeah, intuition is a false thing completely. If it's true in intuition, you took 10 years to develop it in a context that was dependable. This is what Dan O'Reilly in the book Rational Irrationality said, and this is what Kinnaman in the book Fast Thinking, Slow Thinking said. Intuition is only valid in a context that's dependable, regular, systematic, that you can develop those intuitions over 10 years at least. Otherwise, it's just emotion. Otherwise, it's an urge. Otherwise, you're defaulting to something that's not going to be sustainable. It's just a false thing. So people who default to emotions a lot of times call it intuition, and they make some really bad decisions.
So we've got a question here. So how it sounds a lot, we have a couple people saying that this sounds a lot like the axes of change. So yeah, what would you say about that?
Well, yes and no. The axis of change picks out a frame that has put you into a state, either toward or away from, and you're trying to get motivated. But it's not sufficient. And so you find that frame, and then you make a decision that's going to change the thing that needs to change. And so then we go through the pros and the cons and the values. And so that's one little piece of decision making. It's just one piece. It works with some information gathering, some testing, but very little. When you go to the creation axis, then you start creating the how-to, and it picks up more of it. So it's in there a little bit, but executive decision making involves so much more than what's in the axis of change.
So the weighing the pros and cons, the decision axis is part of the executive decision process.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Sometimes even if you are implementing, you make decisions. What do you call these decisions? I'm not quite sure on that one there. Rasha, if you want to specify. Sometimes even if you are implementing, you make decisions. What do you call these decisions?
Well, so once again, you've got your larger frame. This is my decision. To make that decision come true, I've got to do this and this and this and this, and lots of smaller decisions. And inside those smaller decisions are decisions.
Decisions all the way down.
Yeah. So let's say you made a decision you're going to go and see the Grand Canyon. So then there's decision, time, when I'm going to do this, who I'm going to go with, what am I going to do when I'm there, how much money will it cost? Underneath there, under time, how to get there, will I fly, will I drive? And then as you're driving, you're making lots of decisions. Do I stop for gas? Do I stop to eat? So it's a hierarchy of decisions. The smaller decisions in service of the larger, the higher decisions.
So this is actually an interesting one here from Sheila, saying that so decision is the intent to act. As we are not in control of the outcome, then there are no good or bad decisions. Could it mean that we have decided to be unresourceful in dealing with an outcome that does not meet our expectations? It's a bit convoluted, perhaps. Well, what I'm pulling from that is I'm hearing that our decisions are, since we're not in control of the outcomes, then is there such thing as a good decision or a bad decision? I'm hearing here like there's no such thing as failure, only feedback sort of thing.
Well, yes, on the last one, and that's why the last stage of decision making is feedback. So how's it going? What's working? What's not working so well? What resource are you using? What resource do you need to start using? And so then the feedback loop at the end, because with decisions, you live them. So let's say you made a decision to exercise 4 times a week. You're going to go to the gym, you're going to exercise 4 times a week. So as you're doing that, you're getting feedback. And the feedback at any given day may be, I need to do more cardio, I need to do more stretching, need to do more weightlifting, need to use heavier weights, need to use lighter weights. So all of these ongoing decisions is the feedback to how I'm doing and what are my goals.
So opening up the feedback loop in order to continue to inform your prior decision, to continue to refine. Is that fair, that in the feedback stage that you're refining your initial decision?
Exactly. So you're refining it so that it's more livable. Here's a good coaching question. Is the decision you've made livable? Are you living it? Is it enjoyable? Is it increasing the quality of life? Is it livable? And if not, then we need that refinement.
So is your decision livable? Would you like to live by that decision? I think that's one of the questions from the mind to muscle process is, would you like to live by this decision?
Right. So a misunderstanding of a decision is that you decide and that's it. It's over. It's done. But decisions are not like that. You live your decision. So if you've decided to be married to someone and you're married to someone, then you're living the decision. Now you can always redecide. If you decided to exercise and something happens and you're hurt or you've got an injury, then redeciding is I'm going to stop exercising for a week or 2. So it's an ongoing living thing, and not just at a stop.
And I remember from reading through the executive decisions manual that some decisions, I mean, this is in the preparation phase, I believe, that some decisions are easily changeable and some of them aren't. If I'm going to get a tattoo, it's different than if I'm going to get a face painting.
Well, that brings up the consequences of decisions. Sometimes if you go rob someone, if you get a gun and go rob a store and get arrested and get convicted, you're going to be living that decision in a jail. And no matter how much you go, I'm sorry that I did that, you're still going to live out that decision until the term is settled. So sometimes we have to live with consequences. And that also is one of the fear of making decisions. People are afraid of consequences. And while we can't predict the future, we can create a higher probability. And that's where contingency planning helps to think through, if something goes wrong, here's what I'm going to do. Plan B, plan C.
So it sounds like a strategic thinking in a way, kind of thinking through ahead, what are the possibilities and how can I prepare for all the contingencies that are coming up? Sterling has a great question here. So we've got this well-formed decision process. You've got these 3 stages or the 7 steps across those stages. And so we can do that with major decisions, but within that, you're saying there are sub-decisions and decisions within the decision. So how much time should we be spending on some of these, let's say, smaller decisions that are informing, how does that all fit together in terms of time in your real life applications?
Well, a great coaching question for every one of us would be, any decision I make, no matter how small, that is a decision in service of what? So let's say I get upset with someone and curse at them. That decision to curse is in service of, and hopefully that'll expose that was a poor decision. And it was a tiny one, a little one, but it now is like a cancer inside of a larger decision, working against it. So the smallest things you do every day, it is in service of what? And that's in service of what? And this helps us to check the quality and the ecology of decisions.
So this sounds kind of like exploring the decision beyond the decision, or the positive intention behind the decision. This is kind of like the decision facet of the mind, and exploring in its environment, does this do service to its positive intention, or what its meta decision?
Suppose you have a client who constantly cannot achieve the goals that he sets out. So asking the question, what stops you? And as we find out what stops him, it might be he keeps letting himself off the hook. Well, this one time, these brownies look so good. This pasta looks so good. This ice cream looks so. This one time, and this one time, and this one time, and this one time. And so the person who makes those small decisions, but they accumulate. And so understanding the accumulation of small decisions against a goal. And that'll be the structure of how some people sabotage themselves constantly because they keep defaulting to, but it looks so good.
Yeah, and I found in my own experience, it's interesting because then let's say you make the change, if you've ever made a change before where, I don't know, exercising, you don't exercise, and then I don't want to exercise, and then you start exercising, and then you look back and you go, well, of course you're going to default to exercising now. It's kind of like the decisions are based on these frames of mind, this information that you have about what you think about how you do things. But when you come out on the other side, you stop smoking, and then you go, how could I ever smoke? Or why would someone ever smoke? But when you're doing it, you go, I could never stop. And so it's interesting how decisions are relative to our perception or relative to our frames. So we're getting kind of towards the end here. Do you have do you have anything you'd like to share with in terms of anything we haven't covered yet, Michael?
So here's the psychology of decision making. You cannot not make decisions. You make decisions. As a human being, part of your psychology as an adult is that now you make decisions. You may make decisions against making decisions, but that's a decision. So you cannot not make a decision. Given that, we need to focus on how to make great decisions, intelligent decisions, really smart decisions, so that we forge our life. Why make decisions? First of all, for success. to be effective in whatever you're doing. If you don't decide to do something, you probably won't do it. Anything big, magnificent, marvelous, amazing, it takes decision and commitment to make it happen. So if you're going to be effective, if you're going to be successful, success comes to those who know how to make real decisions. So that's the reason why. And sometimes we need to inspire people, so what is something that if there was no fear and nothing holding you back, you would go for? And so we make decisions to be successful. We make decisions to be productive. So sometimes people ask how I produce so many books. Well, a decision to write, a decision to gather the information, to put it together, to write 7 drafts. It came from a decision. It would not happen without a decision. So efficiency is one of the benefits of effective decision making. My decision many years ago was to exercise every day. And I do. I exercise every single day. There's just hardly a day I don't. And so effectiveness, success, and efficiency, productivity, are 2 of the main reasons for making executive decisions and therefore achieving something significant. The third reason is wisdom, because we're talking about discerning values, making distinctions, thinking through things, having quality thinking. And now we can make wise decisions. So the opposite of stupid decisions, poor decisions, sabotaging decisions, is wisdom of making great decisions. And it doesn't come just with age. It comes with thinking through and learning how to commit yourself to the highest and to the best. And that's what we're all about in neurosemantics: the highest meanings, the highest values, the best performance. And that's what we wish for each and every one listening into this.
So I hope that I certainly have gotten a lot more intentionality behind becoming a better decision maker, and also learned a lot more about the strategy here for myself as well as the people that I'm communicating with. And I see how this, for me, this is just so core to neurosemantics. We have the skills to do this. I think if anybody has the skills to make high quality executive decisions, it's us, and to spread that to other people in the world, because I can just see how much that's needed, and how it's not a given, that most people nobody's born with it, and you have to learn how to do it. Well, that's us who has those skills more than anybody.
Yeah.
So, Michael, final words as in closing. Here, what's the schedule? Yeah.
So almost everybody listening here, you do coaching, you do trainings, you do consulting, and then in your personal life, you make decisions. The world is in need of what we have. When we look at the decision making that occurs politically, that occurs in corporations, there's a lot of need for high quality decision making. And as Jason just said, we've got the tools. And so I would say, go get them.
Michael, I see you're still here. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Meeting after the meeting.
You said something that threw me off completely about intuition. And so so the intuition and sixth sense and gut feel, what role does that play in decision making?
Yeah, most of that's just nonsense. Most of that is just superstitious nonsense. The studies on intuition, the word tuition is knowing, and in knowing. And when we're born, we know nothing. We don't have language, we don't have thoughts. It takes years and years as we develop in knowing. So the only way anything gets in is through experience and learning. And so,
okay.
so the only intuitions that are true is someone who has studied something at least 10 years. If someone grows up in a dysfunctional family, their intuitions are going to be completely wrong, although they'll be very systematic.
How does that relate to the kinesthetics? So you know how you like, in my gut, I feel something, my body is telling me something. How would that relate to?
Well, so once again, it all depends on what is the trigger for the kinesthetic. It just completely depends upon whether it's, because you can feel the wrong things. I mean, it's not difficult to feel the wrong things. So that's why we got to keep checking back to cognition and check the quality of our thinking and the quality of our believing to the emotions we're feeling. The emotion is important. It is registering. It is registering something, but that something may not be accurate, true, ethical. And so one of the dangers of parenting is teaching children that every emotion they feel is legitimate, because they're not. We can have lots of false emotions.
Dr. Michael, I have a question. If you
Okay.
just a little, what is the link between part integration and make decision?
Part integration and
make decision.
And making decisions, parts integrations and making decisions.
Exactly.
well, parts integration is that you got two different maps, two different frames, two different beliefs, two different values, and they're in conflict. The old NOP parts integration is a pretty crude way of doing it. Because oftentimes you get the two parts and you force them together. And what Bob and I did many years ago was to do a metastates parts integration. So you take the part and you go up to the frame that's holding it, and the frame that's holding it, and the frame, and you keep going until you got a unity frame. And that'll be more likely to create integration and alignment than just forcing it at the primary level. So it's really not a decision-making process. It's more an integration process. That's the design of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Michael, I want to ask one very basic question. What is definition? The definition, you mean the decision, right? So sometimes because all the executive decision is the combination, integration of so many small decisions, I think. So many small. So when I make a decision to do something, you mentioned sometimes it may be the response. So how can I know I'm doing the decision instead of response?
Well, if I asked you the question, or if you asked yourself the question, what is the decision I'm acting on? That should flush out if you're just reacting.
Yeah.
We could also ask the question, what's driving this decision? Emotion or value or standard or criteria or context? What's driving the decision? With decision, remember that decision is multi-ordinal. So the small everyday decisions is just real small, and that's level 1. Level 2 decision. So this decision is in service of this one, which is in service of that one, which is, so at what level are you making a decision? So if I look around and I look at the clock and I say, oh, it's time to go to the gym. Well, that's a decision. A small decision in service of a larger one. Why are you making that decision? Because I want to be healthy. I've decided I'm going to do exercise every day. And so what is that? So at what level are you deciding? So one of the problems of decision making is we use the same word at all these levels. And we don't have different words to indicate higher level. So that's why I've been saying executive decision is at the top. And then there's strategic decisions, then there's planning decisions, and there's other decisions along the way.
Yes, because to me, making decisions, sometimes we need information. We as a major decision, we need a lot of information to research something. But finally, maybe all the information, we need to good use of that. Otherwise, we will, we will make the decision by our emotion, just you mentioned. So we need to know. So it is so many levels, matter of the matter levels decision. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Every decision is about the future, and the future is unpredictable. I mean, who predicted the virus of 2020? So every decision is about the future. Therefore, every decision is probabilistic.
Okay.
It is probable to a certain degree, more probable, less probable. So what's the likelihood of this happening or that happening? And so another level of decision making is, I'm making this decision, the probability is 80% chance of success. It's good enough, I'm willing to pay the price, 20% it may fail, but if I don't make the decision, I'll never know. Now, if it does fail, I've got contingency plan, A and B, so that it will not be ruinous. It will not ruin my life. So many decisions are probabilistic. And so this is part of high quality decision making. What's the probability? And anybody who says 100% has not thought it through. They haven't looked at what could go wrong. Because we're predicating it on so many things. We're predicating it on I'll be healthy, I'll have no accidents, I'll have no disease, other people will be healthy, will not change. We're just predicating it on so many assumptions.
Yes. Another interesting question is, all decision before making decision is about, I think I making sense, but finally it's not. So all thinking in my mind, it seems to me is making sense. It makes sense, but finally it's not. So this is we need to check the probability by the information. But there are so many fake news now in the world, the situation, fake news, yeah. So it depends on what channel, what information we are receiving.
Yeah.
So it becomes more complicated now to make a decision. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's why in the preparation stage, you'll want to be gathering information and constantly testing it. What's the source of this information? How reliable is this source? Any vested interests that this source may have, pushing and nudging it in a certain way. And
We lost Michael.
Yeah.
I think our time is up.
He made a decision, an executive decision.
All right.
Good one, Jason. Good one.
Bye-bye,
I hope you don't have a closure meta program. We're going to be here until 6 more weeks.
Michael made a decision to disappear himself. Make a decision. Yeah, it's his decision. Got it. Okay. Non-closure now. It is non-closure. All right.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to head out also, I guess.
Thank you.
Oh, no, they're back. Michael is back.
He's back. Okay.
Made another executive decision.
Yes.
Let me see. Pin? Not pin. Spotlight, perhaps. They're connecting.
Can wait for him.
He's back.
a decision
Yes, back. You make the decision.
that we did not make this morning was to plug in the computer.
All right.
Okay, Michael, thank you. I mean, I think
Thank
for
you.
the longest of time, I would collect information and I'd also add my gut feel.
Gut feel.
So what you just said is to really just, that's why I said, oh, it threw me into a spin. So I need to read more, understand more, because I have this thing of part of how I process information is what I feel my body is saying. So I'll add that to whatever else that has been, how to make a decision. So thank you. It's just brought in my mind. I need to read more.
Thank you.
So where will we be before Michael left the room? Where will we when Michael left the room suddenly? Are we? I thought Michael was answering your question, Mandy, no?
Oh, yeah.
Before we lost him.
So we know who has the strongest closure meta program is Mariani.
Finally, you are back. Finally. Otherwise, you cannot sleep tonight.
So you were saying something about the source of the information, how reliable is it, and if there's any vested interest into swaying the information a certain way.
Yeah, that's where it's so important to get high quality information as best we can and from multiple sources. That helps us to prevent the confirmation bias, availability bias, and some of those other biases in which we're making decisions, but we're not really open-minded to the information that's out there.
And those intuitions, are they not based on our prior knowledge, like the information we already have, not necessarily all of the information available? So when we're trusting our intuition based on something, it's only based on the limited information that we've had access to, not necessarily all of the information or the accurate information.
Yeah. So one thing that undermines our decision making are always the black swan events. A black swan event is an event that was not predicted, but could have been predicted. So probably the best example is 9/11, 20 years ago. No one had even thought of using an airplane as a bomb. But when you think about it, think back on it, yeah, why not? But it was a black swan event. Same thing as the virus this past year, a black swan event. It could have been predicted, but nobody predicted it. So black swan events occur actually more often than we suspect. It's only when we look back that it makes sense, and then we reduce the effect of it, and not look forward to what other black swan events could occur. That's where the probability comes in.
So ideally, the older we get, the better decisions we would make, because we have more.
Ideally.
Right.
So just asking the question of ourselves, what could go wrong, and really looking through the whole, scanning the whole context, what could go wrong, is such a great way of testing the quality of our decisions.
Sounds like a black swan pattern.
Say again, Anthony?
Sounds like a black swan pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
I liked your idea. This is Gada from Lebanon. How are you, Michael and Geraldine? I liked your idea about the board game, about the meta programs. Are you still thinking about it?
It was created many years ago, and we still have, I think we still have about 50 copies of the game.
Wow, where in the States?
Well, it's available anywhere.
Maybe I misunderstood. Is it a book or a board game?
It's a board game.
Cool. I'll see about it. I'll search about it. I like a lot about meta programs.
So you can order it on the neurosemantics.com thing.
Yeah.
I will see. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here in Lebanon, we call Ghada Meta Ghada. So her name now is Meta Ghada. She's always asking out meta states and.
because I always ask about, when I hear the word meta, let's say meta state, meta something, I ask. Now today you said meta knowledge. And this word rang a bell. What is meta knowledge? The knowledge about the knowledge.
Yeah. So thank you, Meta Ghada.
Thank you, dear. I always send emails to Dr. Michael and ask him questions, and he answers me directly. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, always.
One thing I did not mention was meta decisions. A meta decision are the decisions you make about your decision making. For instance, I've made a meta decision that I'm going to do high quality information gathering before I make a decision. So that's a meta decision. So your meta decisions govern your decision making powers and abilities.
Oh, I have another question. I noticed now that you talk a lot about the layers in everything you layers. But I was wondering, you said that you read a lot of books before you write your own book. And this is done always by authors. They read a lot to write their own book. I wondered, what do you do exactly? You read the books. What for? What do you get from reading the books? Since you have the ideas and the knowledge in your brain and what your values and what you want to write about. So what is the kind of nourishment you get from the other books?
Oh, well, it's a great question. And those of us who write know that it is mostly plagiarism. we call it research.
Yeah.
Or call it meta knowledge.
Copy paste.
So I read and like what I've been reading in both Decision and Metaphor, very academic works that have and the academics write in such a way that there's no application. So what I want to do is to translate it from the academic world and the research world into something practical that can be used. So with decision making, I probably read 50 books. I probably had 20 of them already in my library, and so I reread all of those. And then I started searching for what else has been developed in the last few years, different approaches to decision making, different models, different theories. So looking at it from that perspective, and then bringing it and putting it through the lens of NLP or the lens of neurosemantics. The lens of neurosemantics especially is the lens of here's some meaning and here's some practice. And here's that connection between meaning and practice. And so the nice thing about reading, and I always try to read at least 5 or 6 books of authors that I totally disagree with.
So that you don't become biased, as you said.
Because then they challenge me. Because then I have to think this argument, that argument, and this source of information, that source, and seeing if they're using some cognitive fallacies in the way. And so I always read people I disagree with in order to refine the distinctions and the points that I want to make. And oftentimes I change my mind.
Good.
So I'll read.
Tuning.
Yeah, I'll read and I'll change my mind because they made an argument that makes perfect sense, fits into the premises, and I was just wrong. So to me, finding out where I'm wrong is one of the joys of learning.
Yes, I feel this too. Thank you very much. Because if I want to ask you and talk to you, I will spend maybe 3 to 4 hours.
We are lucky. We are lucky to have Michael Hall. We are lucky. We are lucky. Thank you. Thank you.
We need to end the meeting. Or
He has to go ahead. Thank you, guys. Bye. Thank you, Michael.
Come visit us to Lebanon. Waiting for you to visit us in Lebanon after the corona.
Yes, Lebanon is one of the places I'd like to go.
It's an open invitation whenever.
And you can also visit him next this year, actually, in Egypt when he's coming. It's only 1 hour trip from Lebanon to Egypt.
Yes. Inshallah. Hope so.
So thank you, everyone, and see you next month
Thank
in
you.
our community call.
Thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
your best decision making.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Yalla, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.